Hi, welcome to another edition of Antique Radio Archaeology. Today we're going to begin part 3 of the Chelsea Super 5 series with a restoration on a 1926 model Chelsea Super 5. Now, before we begin that restoration, let's talk a little bit about the 1926 model year. There are two variations of the 1926 model that I know of, and they are right here. These are fully restored. This is what I consider the early version, and this is a later version. The early version, I believe, was probably produced only in 1925. Like usual, Chelsea introduced their next year's model in about October-November timeframe, mainly to get the Christmas rush. And the thing is, this particular one had some flaws in it, and I don't believe they continued making this one. I think they started with this one and then realized this major design flaw and then went on and started producing this version of it. Now let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So this is what I consider the early version. Now it's a nice looking radio, and with the 1926 design it has this metal chassis right here. Now the problem is this particular case, which is actually the 1925 case that was used, has these strips here on the side and the faceplate slides into from the top. Well, the problem you have here is, number one, the angle with this particular latching mechanism is not going to allow you to slide that in, so you have to detach that. The other thing is this metal chassis won't allow you to slide this out, and behind here, behind these screws, is a nut holding the metal chassis to the faceplate. So that really causes an issue if you try to remove this. So the only way to do it is you're going to have to pry off these strips, which are nailed in, and then nail them back in and refinish them. So it's just not practical. If you have to do any work on the radio or have to get inside of it, you basically have to disassemble the case, and that's not a good thing. So I think they only did this temporarily and then realized, okay, this isn't going to work, so we're going to go ahead and redesign the case. And that they did. So this is what the later version looks like. It has a faceplate that screws directly onto the case. The case is a little bit wider from front to back at the top. The base is also wider, actually. I think they did that probably to help with the fitting all the components in. But as you can see, the same metal chassis. Now this chassis does have a little bit more of an angle, where this one is more straight up and down because of course it's narrower. So that is the major differences between the earlier and later version of the 1926 Super 5. Now the only other thing I'd like to add is the fact that this was probably Chelsea's biggest seller as a retailer. For some reason, the Super 5 was not included in the Gimbel's line. I don't know why that happened, but you don't see any Gimbel's version of the Chelsea Super 5, so these were sold directly by Chelsea. And they had a huge advertising campaign, and if you do any kind of search through newspapers and stuff like that during the 1926 time frame, you'll see that this particular version of the Super 5 was probably the most sold version. And you know, it is, with the metal chassis and everything, that helps with the RF a little bit. I think it is a little bit better model than the earlier versions, and we'll get into 1927 a little bit later, but that one I don't think sold nearly as many as this particular version. And if you're collecting Chelsea radios, you will find that the this particular version right here is probably the most prolific out there. So you'll see a lot of these. You'll see very few of those, and as well as the 1927 versions and the 1925 versions. So this is the last of my wood-faced metal chassis Chelsea 5 radios, and I'm going to go ahead and do a restoration on it. I'm doing this in conjunction with another radio that I'm working on, so it's going to be a little bit chaotic, but just want to get this thing torn apart so I can get started on some of the major assemblies here. The face on this one has a lot to be desired. I've got some replaced veneer there that wasn't done very well. There's not much I can do about it. Maybe try to clean it up a little. Same here. But other than that, it's just a matter of trying to clean up that faceplate the best I can. The case itself's in really good shape. There's one crack that I have to deal with, and that's here on the side. But I'm not too concerned about those cracks down there. But it's in pretty good shape otherwise. Now the chassis itself, chassis itself has some issues. I've got right here, somebody had screwed a hole in there. Don't know why, but it's not too big of an issue, but it's an issue. It just needs to be repaired. But I'm more than likely going, I have a chassis that's already been restored, just the chassis, so I'm probably just going to swap that out. Internally, everything's great. Coils are in good shape. Of course, the wiring harness is going to be replaced. But the only thing that I really have an issue with is, well, shoot, this coil assembly here is not looking good. I may have to replace that one. But that's easy. I can just replace the one coil. The issue that I have is this resistor here is bad. Everything else looks okay except it's missing the transformers and the mounting hardware and everything. Now this one actually, I believe, came with the mounting hardware. So I'm going to go ahead and see what I got, and I should be able to come up with some transformers. But that's about it. It's definitely got some things to work on, but some of it's in good shape, some of it's in kind of rough shape. So the reason I spent so much time on this switch is this is actually one of the biggest problems I've seen with the Chelsea Super 5s is this switch here definitely gets some corrosion on it, and a lot of times you'll turn it on and nothing will come up. So I always take these apart and clean them when I restore these. What I'd like to do is I'm going to replace this coil. This one's kind of boogered up, and I've got a replacement coil off another Chelsea spare parts radio, and unfortunately this is a number 2 coil. This is a 1, 2, and 3 coil. They're all wired slightly differently. This one here has a center tap, and it's all one universal winding. These are 2 separate windings. This is 2 separate windings, but the windings are reversed. So on this one, this is a number 2, this is a number 3. If you notice on the number 2, that if you look at this little gap right here, this part of that wire comes over here and hits this first one. Over here it goes down and hits the last one. The other side of that comes over here and hits here. The other side of that comes over and hits here. The inner winding here comes out and hits there. The inner winding here comes over and hits that one. And finally the outer winding comes over and it hits that first one. The outer winding here doubles back and hits that one right there. So I need to make this coil look like that coil, which I'm going to do right now. Alright, so here's where I'm at on this. It looks like some kind of epoxy was used to try and repair this here, and that does not look good. The finish on it is cracking, very kind of like a reptile skin throughout the whole thing. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to lightly sand over the top of this. Luckily the lettering on all this is kind of deep, which is unusual. Usually they're not quite as deep, so that might help me out, and I might be able to save the lettering and still be able to sand, at least get the top coat off of there, and try and make some repairs. What I think I'm going to do is just use some filler and try to fill in these cracks and gaps, but shouldn't be too difficult, but I won't know it until I try it. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so I don't know how well the camera's going to show this, but there is a lot of cracking in that finish. And that is a problem. So I think what I'm going to have to do is sand it all down, at least get through the cracking, and try to put another coat of lacquer on it. I don't know. I'm gonna try that first and then go from there. Unfortunately, these situations are kind of hard to gauge, and I got to be real careful that I don't penetrate through and knock out the all the work I did on trying to get the lettering and graphics from being in too bad a shape. So let's see what I can do here. Alright, so I had a bit of a mishap. I wasn't satisfied with the panel the way it was. There were some flaws in the finish that were really bugging me. So I went ahead and I just let it sit for a couple of days, looked at it again, decided I just can't live with those flaws. So I tried hitting it with a light coat of lacquer, hoping that this time it wouldn't crack. And everything seemed fine, it looked great, and then all of a sudden, after a couple of days, it cracked again. And I was like, okay. So I had to strip it all back down. Obviously, it was quite a bit of work, and went from scratch again, restained it, refinished it with just shellac, and I'm leaving this as is. This is the final rendition of it. I'm not going to do any more to it, and I'm just going to live with it the way it is. So these things happen. Alright, I got a crack there that I need to rectify. Very big crack, actually. Oops. Alright, so if you look here, you can see there's a little bit of a gap here where this is bowed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a slit down here and then screw that up so that it's all flush. So all the parts are cleaned up and ready to go. We just need to begin reassembly at this point. Okay, so I'm ready to start wiring this transformer. Now, if you remember, primaries and secondaries are reversed. This is the secondary, primary, secondary, primary. So this primary goes to between filament and the grid. This primary goes between filament and that grid. Go ahead. Okay, so the transformer is wired in. Alright, so I made kind of a stupid mistake here that I need to rectify. My A minus here is tied to here, which is tied to that plate. So I knew I needed to tie it to these plates here, but the problem is I forgot that this plate here is not the same as these two plates, which are joined by this jumper there. So this should be my A minus. Instead I made this my A minus, which is wrong. So that's got to come off of here, and I got to tie it to something that's tied to here. Okay, so the wiring's complete. Let's take a look at it real quick. I did go ahead and join those two plates on this diagram, and I added a 6 there instead of a 5. Had that mislabeled, but this is the 1926 Chelsea Super 5 component layout, and the only difference between, there is one variation, and that's that R1 right there. As you can see, this does not have an R1, it just has a direct short between those two. I have another one of these, same model, but it does have the R1 in it. So that seems to be an option depending on when it was built, I guess. But other than that, they're all the same. As far as operation, you've got pretty much everything operates very similar to the 1925 later version. Everything is identical except for the rheostats. On the later version of the 1925, both rheostats, one end of it was tied to ground. On this one end's tied to ground, the wiper on the other is tied to ground. So the first rheostat controls V1 and V2, the second rheostat controls V3, 4, and 5 in a slightly different configuration than the later version. But other than that, they seem to be identical. There is a resistor here, R1, between this coil here and here if it's used. But like I said, in this one it is not, so that would be a dead short. Other than that, it's the same. You have your tank circuit here coming off the antenna, going into the grid of V1. It's going to narrow down that frequency to the tank circuit of V2, and that's going to narrow it down even further. Come here, hit the tank circuit on V3, which along with the grid leak and that tube, this capacitor develops the audio, and this will detect the audio by filtering out the RF and passing it on to T1. T1 V4 is an amplifier circuit. For your detector, you have your plus 45 volts going to it. For the amplification stage, you have 90 volts coming through, hitting this plate, and it goes on to that phone jack here. The phone jack is going to pick up the audio coming out of V4, and then it's amplified again. It'll hit V5. This time you have to put the speaker between the loudspeaker jack and the plate in order to transfer that 90 volts over to V5, so it does not conduct unless there's a speaker plugged in, and that gives us our audio to speaker. Your 90 volts also comes back and supplies plate voltage to L3 and L2. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So that's the operation of the 1926 version. Of course, you have the metal chassis, which gives you a little bit more in the way of RF shielding. So that was probably the main reason for going to that. And we're going to go ahead and put this thing in the case and fire it up, see how it works. Okay, so I got the antenna hooked up. I have the RB3 universal battery eliminator hooked up to all the power wires. I have my speaker hooked up. Make sure the RB is on. It is. Let's go ahead and fire it up. Okay, that's 7:50 a.m. Let me see if I can get my home radio station. There it is. It actually sounds good, but it should be a lot louder than that. I'll check something. That's the headphones. That's the speaker. That's not good. It should be a lot louder in the speaker. Okay, so, well, we know it works. I just need to figure out what's going on. For some reason, my second amplifier doesn't seem to be working here, so I guess we need to do a little bit further troubleshooting. Okay, so I finally figured out what my problem is, and it's not good news. Unfortunately, what I did was I wired my transformers backwards. My primaries are hooked where the secondaries should be, the secondaries are hooked where the primaries should be. So I have to pull all the wiring out for the transformers and rewire them properly. So that's going to take me a while, but you don't have to deal with it. I'm going to just go ahead and do it, and I'll come right back. Okay, so it did take me a while, but I got the transformer rewired correctly so that the primaries are where the primaries need to be and the secondaries where the secondaries need to be. So this thing should be ready to go. I went ahead, I did quickly test it. It does work, so I'm going to go ahead and get it all back together, and you can hear how it sounds the way it should sound. Okay, she's all hooked up, ready to go. Let's give her a try again. Headphones. Speaker. That's the way it should sound. So this has been quite the adventure. That faceplate, I really just did not see that one coming. There was a lot of issues. The first, obviously, was the cracking. It was a nice looking plate up to that point. And then trying to refinish it, I got it to where it looked decent again. It cracked again, and then on the third try I had to strip it all the way down, and of course in doing that I messed up the graphics on it, and so it's just not what it could have been, and I'm very disappointed in that portion of this restoration, but it still looks nice. It's still a decent restoration, and I did bring another radio back to life. Electronically, it's sound. Obviously, we had our hiccups in that part of the process. I can't believe I miswired the primaries and secondaries of those transformers. That caused hours worth of work. Had to rewire that, of course, but in the end it all turned out, and we have another radio ready to go back into the inventory as a working restoration. So I'm real pleased with that. The next video is going to be on the 1927 Chelsea Super 5. I've already started that, obviously, and hope to bring that one to you a little bit quicker than this one. This one wound up taking about a month altogether to get it all straight, so the other one shouldn't be that bad. I should be done with that in another week or so. So anyway, happy restorations, everybody. I hope to see you again next video. Have a great day. Goodbye.